Hey, welcome to Crime Time 911. You know, when we talk about love in the digital age, we often imagine possibilities, not pitfalls. We think of that one swipe that could change everything. The idea that behind a profile picture and a clever bio might be the one. But in this story, that swipe didn't lead to love. It led to heartbreak, deception, and a global Netflix documentary that had millions of people saying, "How did this even happen?" When I first heard about the Tinder Swindler, I thought it was just another wild dating app story. You know the kind. Bad dates, ghosting, awkward messages. But the more I listened, the more I realized that this wasn't just a bad date gone wrong. This was a masterclass in manipulation, played out one message, one photo, one promise at a time. At its core, it's a story about trust. How we give it, how it can be taken, and what happens when someone decides to weaponize it. And it all starts with one man who seemed, on the surface, to have it all. Charm, wealth, confidence, and a life that most of us would only ever see in magazines. The man at the center of it all called himself Simon Leviev. But as we'll learn, that name wasn't really his. The photos weren't what they seemed. And the love story? It was a stage, perfectly set to lure people in who just wanted to believe in romance. Before we dive into the chaos that followed, let's rewind. Let's go back to the beginning, before the fame, before the lies, and before the Tinder Swindler became a phrase the world couldn't stop repeating. So who was Simon Leviev? According to the man himself, or at least according to his Tinder profile, he was the son of a billionaire. Leviev, a powerful Israeli diamond mogul. That's quite the pedigree, right? It instantly explains the private jets, the designer suits, the luxury hotels. It's the kind of profile that makes you pause, scroll back and think, wait, is this real? And that's exactly what he wanted. But the truth? Simon Leviev wasn't born into wealth. His real name was Shimon Hayut, an Israeli man who, long before the Tinder headlines, had already been in trouble with the law for fraud-related offenses. He'd even fled his home country to escape charges, but instead of laying low, he reinvented himself. What's fascinating here is how well he understood digital perception. On apps like Tinder, people often see what they want to see. A private jet photo equals success. A dinner at a 5-star hotel equals sophistication. Combine that with a handsome smile and emotional availability, and you have the perfect illusion. It's almost like a magic trick, except the cards are Instagram posts and the illusion is someone's entire identity. Simon used every social media platform as his stage. He posted images of expensive watches, yachts, and champagne dinners, but he never flaunted them in a crass way. He balanced the glamour with moments of vulnerability, talking about danger in the diamond business or loneliness on the road. That's what made him believable. He didn't come across as arrogant. He came across as human. And that right there is lesson number 1 in how online deception works. Credibility isn't built on perfection, it's built on relatability. When people met him in person, the illusion deepened. He was polite, attentive, and charismatic. He remembered small details. He seemed genuinely interested. Within days, he'd swept his dates off their feet, literally. Private jets, exotic cities, spontaneous trips, and every moment was documented, every experience was curated. The goal wasn't just to impress, it was to create a shared memory. Something that would make the relationship feel real, tangible, and irreplaceable. What's really chilling, though, is that these same memories, these snapshots of happiness, became the foundation of his manipulation later on. Now, if you've ever wondered how someone could fall for a scam like this, it's important to remember this wasn't a quick con. It was a slow burn, a psychological chess game. The victims, intelligent, capable women, weren't careless or naive. They were emotionally invested, and Simon knew exactly how to make that happen. His method followed a pattern: one that psychologists often called love bombing. It starts with overwhelming affection and attention, constant messages, grand gestures, intense connection. The goal, to build attachment quickly before doubt has a chance to grow. He would tell his dates that he'd never met anyone like them, that he wanted to build a future together. And because the experiences were so extraordinary, flying to another country on a whim, being treated like royalty, it reinforced the fantasy that this was something rare. Once that emotional foundation was in place, the manipulation began to shift gears. Simon introduced danger into the story. He'd claim that his life was at risk because of competitors or enemies in the diamond trade. He'd send photos of his injured bodyguard or videos of chaos, creating the illusion of constant threat. Then, he'd say that for safety reasons, he couldn't use his own bank account or cards. And here's the crucial part. He didn't ask for a handout. He asked for help. He framed the situation like a temporary problem that his partner could solve, just a short-term loan until things calmed down. And because he'd already proven his wealth, there was no reason to doubt he'd pay them back. That's the psychological brilliance behind it. The victims didn't think they were giving money away. They thought they were helping someone they loved, someone who'd already given them so much. It's easy from the outside to say, I'd never fall for that, but that's the power of emotional manipulation. It doesn't target your logic, it targets your empathy. And the deeper that emotional connection runs, the harder it becomes to separate the person you care about from the actions that don't make sense. This is where Simon excelled. He wasn't just conning people financially, he was conning their emotions. Each message, each voice note, each promise was part of a script designed to create loyalty and urgency. And once that connection was built, it was only a matter of time before the financial requests grew larger. The lies grew bolder. The illusion started to collapse. But before the collapse came, there was heartbreak and a devastating realization that the man they loved never really existed. You know, it's one thing to hear about a scam. It's another to imagine being inside of it, living it, believing every word, every message, every promise. The women who crossed paths with Simon, women like Cecile, Pernilla, and Aileen, weren't clueless or careless. They were just human, looking for connection, and that's something almost everyone can relate to. Cecile, for example, matched with Simon on Tinder back in 2018. She described him as confident, charming, and attentive, the kind of person who made her feel special instantly. Within days, they were flying together, dining in lavish restaurants, talking about their futures. To her, Simon wasn't a stranger. He was a dream she thought she'd finally caught. So when he said his enemies were after him, when he said he couldn't use his cards because his security was compromised, she didn't hesitate. She took out loans. She believed she was protecting the man she loved. Think about that for a second. Not because of the money, but because of the trust. When you're emotionally invested in someone, logic doesn't always drive your choices. Emotion does. And the genius, or the cruelty, of Simon's operation was that he ran these relationships like overlapping storylines. While Cecile was sending money, he was wining and dining the next woman, using that very same money to fund the illusion for someone else. It was a cycle, a self-sustaining web of deception. Each victim's loan helped him create a believable life for the next target. And because he maintained contact, constantly messaging, calling, sending voice notes, the illusion stayed alive even as the financial pressure mounted. Pernilla, another woman caught in his web, wasn't romantically involved with him. They were just friends. That's what makes her story even more striking. It shows this wasn't just about seduction. It was about connection. She trusted him. She saw him as family. And yet, she too was manipulated into sending large sums of money after hearing about his supposed danger. When the truth finally surfaced, the emotional damage was immense. The financial loss was devastating, yes, But the sense of betrayal ran even deeper. Imagine realizing that every word, every kiss, every promise was scripted. That's the kind of wound that doesn't show on a balance sheet. And that's why this story hit so hard for people around the world. Because it didn't just expose one man's lies, it exposed how easy it can be to believe in someone who tells you exactly what you want to hear. Now, let's talk about how something like this works on a psychological level. Because what Simon did, as manipulative as it was, follows a pattern that experts recognize. It starts with idealization. He presented himself as the perfect partner, attentive, available, and exciting. That kind of intensity releases chemicals in the brain like dopamine, the same ones that reinforce attachment and trust. It literally rewires how we perceive someone. Then comes dependency. Once that emotional bond is strong, the manipulator introduces instability, a crisis, a threat, a need for help. And suddenly the victim's brain switches from romance to rescue mode. They feel responsible for protecting that person. The final stage is rationalization. That's when the victim starts explaining away inconsistencies. He's busy. He's stressed. He'll pay me back. These aren't foolish thoughts. They're human defense mechanisms. It's how the mind protects itself from heartbreak. And Simon, he exploited every stage masterfully. He didn't need physical violence. His weapon was belief. Experts in social engineering often say that scams aren't about greed. They're about hope. Hope that love is real. Hope that the person you met online is who they say they are. Hope that the future you're building together actually exists. That's what makes this story so haunting, because truthfully, anyone can fall for something when the emotional payoff feels that real. And in today's world, where so much connection happens behind screens, that line between truth and illusion gets blurrier every single day. There's also something else that made this con so powerful: social proof. Simon surrounded himself with images and people that validated his persona. The private jets, the security guards, the luxury lifestyle. All of it created what psychologists call the halo effect. If everything looks perfect, we tend to assume the person is trustworthy. It's why influencers gain credibility simply by association with wealth or status. We're conditioned to believe what we see. The scary part, that instinct to trust what looks legitimate, is hardwired. It's what allows scams like this to thrive, not just in dating, but in every corner of the internet. Eventually, the cracks begin to show. Cecile, after months of financial strain and confusion, began to piece things together. She realized that the man who once seemed like her soulmate had disappeared, and that the money she'd lent him wasn't coming back. She turned to journalists and authorities, hoping someone would take her seriously. And that's when the story started to snowball. Norwegian newspaper VG began investigating, digging into Simon's identity. What they found was shocking: multiple aliases, false passports, and a long history of deception. The man calling himself Simon Leviev had been doing this for years. When the article dropped, it went viral. And not long after, Netflix turned the investigation into a documentary that exposed everything on a global scale. But here's what's both fascinating and frustrating. Even with all the exposure, Simon faced minimal consequences. He was eventually arrested in Greece for using a fake passport and extradited to Israel, but he served only a short prison sentence, just a few months before being released. The women, meanwhile, were left with debts that took years to pay off. That imbalance struck a chord with audiences everywhere. It made people question, how can someone cause so much harm emotionally and financially and still walk free? And even more bizarre, after his release, Simon went right back online. He was posting photos of luxury cars, designer clothes, and even hinting at new business ventures. It felt almost like a slap in the face to the people he'd hurt. but it also revealed something deeper about the world we live in. A world where image often outweighs truth, where social media gives anyone, even a proven manipulator, a platform to rebuild their narrative. When I think about it, it makes me wonder, are we as a society too quick to forget? Or are we just too fascinated by the spectacle of it all to look away? Either way, the Tinder Swindler wasn't just a story about one man's lies. It became a mirror, reflecting the vulnerabilities, the temptation, and the illusions that come with living our lives online. When I look at everything that happened in this story, I can't help but think this could have been anyone. That's what makes the Tinder Swindler so unsettling. It's not just about one con artist. It's about the vulnerabilities baked into how we connect today. Dating apps are designed to encourage quick impressions. You swipe right based on a handful of photos and a short bio, and within minutes, you might be messaging someone who feels like they truly get you. The entire system is built on instinct, and instinct is emotional, not analytical. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. But it does create a space where manipulation can thrive. Simon understood that. He used the speed of connection to his advantage. The faster the emotional bond formed, the less time his victims had to verify who he really was. So what can we learn from that? The first lesson is about pace. If something feels like it's moving too fast, whether it's romance or even friendship online, that's often a sign to slow down. Genuine friendships can handle time. Manipulative ones, on the other hand, depend on urgency. The second lesson is about proof. Online, it's easy to take people at face value, their photos, their stories, their jobs. But a bit of curiosity can go a long way. Reverse image searches, video calls, and even casual questions about someone's background can reveal a lot. And then there's the third lesson, boundaries. Love and generosity are beautiful things, but they should never come at the cost of your own safety or stability. If someone you're dating starts mixing emotional intimacy with financial dependency, that's not love, that's leverage. It's also worth looking at what platforms themselves can do. After the Netflix documentary dropped, Tinder claimed it permanently banned Simon Leviev from their app. They also began implementing stronger verification tools and safety features like photo authentication and video verification. But technology alone can't fix what's ultimately a human vulnerability. Trust isn't code you can patch. It's something we give, sometimes too freely, because we want to believe in connections. And I get it. We all do. We all want to believe that behind every message and emoji and good morning text, there's someone real, someone genuine. That's the part of the story that hits the hardest. The reminder that love makes us open. And sometimes that openness comes with risk. Still, I don't think the takeaway is to stop trusting. I think it's to trust wiser. To know that being curious doesn't make you cynical. It makes you conscious. When I think back to the Tinder Swindler, I don't see a story about a scammer. I see a story about longing, for love, for connection, for something meaningful in an age where everything moves too fast and too shallow. Simon Leviev may have fooled people, but what he really did was exploit the most human part of us, the desire to be seen, to be chosen, to be loved. That's why this story struck such a chord globally, because it reminded us that in a world full of filters, algorithms, and curated lives, authenticity is still our most valuable currency. Now, some people look at stories like this and say, that's why I'll never trust anyone online again. But I think there's a better perspective. Not fear, but awareness. Awareness that even in a digital world, emotions are real. That caution and openness can coexist. That technology can connect us, but it can also blind us if we let it. And maybe that's the balance we're still learning to find, how to believe in people without surrendering our sense of self. The women who came forward, Cecile, Pernilla, and Aileen, they didn't just share their pain, they took their power back. By telling their stories, they strip Simon of his greatest weapon, silence. That's something I really admire, because speaking up, even when it's painful, is how we take control of the narrative. Since then, the Tinder Swindler has become more than just a documentary. It's a cultural touch point. It's sparked discussions about safety online, emotional intelligence, and the way social media shapes who we trust. And it's also forced us to ask a bigger question. In a world where anyone can be anyone, how do we decide who's real? Maybe the answer isn't about perfect verification systems or background checks. Maybe it's about learning to slow down, to ask questions, and to listen to that quiet voice inside that says something doesn't feel right. It's not paranoia, it's protection. If there's one takeaway from all of this, it's that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's part of what makes us human. In a world that moves as fast as ours does, we owe it to ourselves to pair that vulnerability with awareness, because love, the real kind, doesn't ask you to compromise your peace, your safety, or your self-worth. And if someone does, that's not love. That's manipulation dressed as romance. So maybe the lesson from the Tinder Swindler isn't to stop swiping or to stop hoping. Maybe it's just to remember that trust should always be earned, not borrowed. Because at the end of the day, the greatest protection that we have in this digital age isn't a background check or a dating app policy, it's self-awareness. And that's something no scammer can fake. Don't forget to follow, like, and share. It helps people discover these stories and keeps the conversation going. Thanks for listening to Crime Time 911. Stay safe, stay curious, and remember to always trust your gut.